Hello again, I'm Tripp Rogers, and this is Tripp's Take. Well, we are in the final week of 2024. What kind of a year was it? Well, you always got to sit back and you think back to the year and you think about what happened most personally and, in and around your world. Of course, I found it kind of interesting that as you listen to holiday messages, people were talking about Ukraine and Israel. And unfortunately, they had recorded these a year ago and were able to reuse them because the same conflicts still involve us and are still going on at this point. Now, I hope something will change, and that something comes in January 20th, Donald Trump. And again, at this time last year, did we really think that Donald Trump would be reelected president again? Did we think it? I have to honestly say I didn't think it. I knew he was probably going to be the Republican nominee, but I didn't give him much of a chance. But then again, I did not think that Joe Biden was an especially effective president. And then at the end of June, we found out how ineffective a president he had been and how much he really just was not on the ball. And the Democrats did what they had to do. The problem was they replaced him with another candidate that just was not that good. And that's something that people, they wanted to paint Donald Trump as the boogeyman, which, as my buddy Dolph said, most of the time it was true. But the problem is, he's the one people chose. He's the one that was elected. Just as it was tough for people to accept that Joe Biden was elected president, well, the shoe's on the other foot now. And these same people who were screaming because of what the Trumpites were doing are now screaming again. You can't have it both ways, folks. And as my buddy Dolph says, this is the liberal way of thinking. They sit there and it's, do as I say, not as I do. And I don't think that's right. I really don't think that's right. And that's part of the problem with America. Now, was it a decisive election? I know we've talked about it. It wasn't decisive. While the Republicans now control both the House and the Senate, they don't have a veto-proof majority. And I got a funny feeling it's going to be politics as it has been for a number of years. The Republicans are going to fight the Democrats, and, it's just, nothing's going to get solved. And the problem is the United States, in the end, is the one that loses. Now, I do have to admit, I feel a little bit better as Donald Trump is president, because I feel he will strengthen our military and he will do something about the border crisis. But again, Donald Trump is going to have to act and do it quite quickly. But again, as I said, at this time last year, I did not think Donald Trump was going to be elected president. I really didn't. And I was rather surprised that Donald Trump came out on top in the election. But listen, we move onward and upward. As we end 2024, we now go into another election cycle. I'm not making fun of this. This is the truth. Because we are going to have to elect a new president. Donald Trump cannot run again. He, according to the Constitution, will have served 2 terms by 2028. He can't run again. No matter how much he wants to, he can't because he's now been elected twice. Of course, the first president to serve 2 non-sequential terms since Grover Cleveland did back in the 1800s, actually in the 1890s, I do believe. Of course, as I also mentioned a couple of times, Grover Cleveland, born in Caldwell, New Jersey, where I grew up. So there you go. And one of the highlights of every Cub Scout and Girl Scout is to go to Grover Cleveland's birthplace. Every troop goes there. and you get to see the wedding cake that has been preserved. I'm serious. Remember when we took my daughter there? She couldn't believe that, but it is the truth. It is the truth. One of those wacky things that you will find at certain places. You know, again, Grover Cleveland's birthplace. And that is Caldwell's right of, that is Caldwell's claim to fame. There you, there you go. I do hope 2024 has been good to you. I mean, personally, I turned 65, so now I am I am eligible and I am getting Medicaid. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I don't know yet, but I do have to admit it is somewhat nice to have some type of health insurance that is kind of universally accepted. Because again, if you're here in the country, it's universally accepted. But I'm not too sure. I'm happy to have made it to this point. I mean, some of my friends have not made it to this point. And of course, we were reminded, I didn't, I just thought about this. I did not realize I was the same age as Rickey Henderson. Rickey Henderson passed away recently at the age of 65. And I'd remiss by not mentioning Rickey Henderson because I covered the Yankees when Rickey played for the Yankees. Well, I'm Rickey Henderson, actually 3 Rickey Henderson stories. All right, so I digress a little bit. First one, I covered Rickey Henderson when he played for the Yankees. And I have to say, he was a tremendous pain in the ass. That's the truth. That is true. And you can ask sports writers, sportscasters, they'll say the same thing. Rickey was only interested in Rickey. I cannot tell you how many times I saw him bolt out of the clubhouse, not wanting to talk to any sports writers or sportscasters about the game. That's the way Rickey was. And of course, he talked in the third person. Rickey was the greatest. Yes, of course. The second Rickey Henderson story I will tell, and it tells you a little bit about him. I went to a Father's Day game, and I want to say 88, 89, with Rickey Henderson playing for the Yankees, playing leadoff for the Yankees. It was the Yankees against the Detroit Tigers. I went with my best friend Scott and his parents to the game because he had gotten his father tickets for Father's Day, and they asked me to come along. Well, the game was a 0-0 pitcher's duel. Bottom of the 9th inning, Rickey Henderson draws a walk, steals second, steals third, and scores on a single. 1-0 Yankees, a winner. And that's quintessential Rickey Henderson. The other story I'll tell, and I've had this confirmed by a couple of people who were told this story. John Olerud was a player who was very famous for wearing a batting helmet playing first base. Now, this was due to the fact that he had an injury and had to have surgery, and he used it to protect his head because, again, he had some surgery. So he would play first base wearing a batting helmet. And it didn't have a flap on it. It was a regular batting helmet. So in 1990, or it was 2000, it was 2000, he was playing for the Blue Jays. And Rickey Henderson was also playing for the Blue Jays. And Rickey came up to him and said, I played with a guy last year who wore a batting helmet when he played first base too. John Olerud looked at Rickey and said, Rickey, that was me. We were teammates last year. That is a great story. Although, again, Rickey Henderson had mellowed somewhat. He was 65 when he passed away last Saturday. So that is Tripp's Take for the 26th of December. Boxing Day in England, also Return Day in the stores. And it's pretty crazy. If you got a comment or question about my podcast, please feel free to email trippstake@gmail.com. Fantasy football players, we are in championship weekend. Not a good end of the season for me. The Hall of Famer Mike Sheck and yours truly have our Fantasy Sultans podcast, which you can catch right now on Spotify for podcasters, and on YouTube. Just search for Fantasy Sultans. Also, don't forget the Sultans will be on Sunday morning at noon. Sunday with the Fantasy Sultans is available on Fox Sports New Jersey stations and foxsportsnewjersey.com. If you like the music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you can listen to WTRSradio.com. Join me again next week when we'll have a brand new year to talk about. I thank you for joining me. I'm Tripp Rogers. Make it a great one.